So welcome, everyone. Let me give you a quick lowdown. Of course, as most of you know, and you can tell, I'm presenting from home. So when you're presenting from home, things like normal day life will happen. Like, my dogs will bark, or my kids will give me some attitude because I have teenagers. So you just never know. Like literally was just teaching a Zoom fitness class, and the last 5 minutes, Zoom kicked me out of it completely. So if something like that happens, we'll let you back in. All right, so what's going to happen today? We are together for 90 minutes. And in those 90 minutes, I would like to spend an hour and 15, if not an hour and 20, doing what we're supposed to be doing today, and then giving you a little bit of time at the end so you can ask me questions. Will I know the answers? I don't know. Hopefully I will. I'll do my best. And again, I'm just like you guys. I am a student. I am still learning. And so for those of you who are new to this, for my newer instructors, perhaps, or my university students, I just want you may feel a little bit overwhelmed. You're going to get a lot of golden nuggets of information. For my seasoned, experienced leaders, I just maybe make you think of something a different way, or make you go, oh yeah, I forgot. I used to do that exercise and I forgot about it, right? That happens to us. So I want you to think about it that way. So my newer leaders, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I have so many nuggets. I don't even know where to store them. My seasoned pros, maybe one, maybe two, a couple more nuggets of information. Okay, good. At any point, while we're going on, you don't have to save your questions to the end with me. You are more than welcome to ask as we go, and then hopefully I'll make sure that I address all of those as we're going. Yes? Thumbs up, you can all hear me okay? Beautiful. Okay, let's get started. I'm gonna start sharing my slides with you so you can see. Yes, I want my desktop. Let me do this instead. Nope. That didn't do what I wanted it to do. I want this. Now, can you see my slides?
Yes.
You can see them okay? Okay. Because some of you being the university students, you're like, oh yeah, this is a little bit different than what we do. So you can see my slides okay. And I think I've met everyone before, but in case I haven't, my name is Jessica Parasir. I am the Wellness and Lifestyle Director at the Glencoe Club. I'm also a university instructor for some of you at Mount Royal University. So we may have some program design students or the fitness and appraisal lifestyle students here today. And of course, I see lots of the instructors, lots of faces I recognize. And I'm also a instructor examiner with the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology and an AFLCA trainer of trainers. So I spend a lot of time hanging out with you guys, really, at the end of the day. So my goal is to just make you think outside the box. I know I've done it as an instructor. I know I've done it as a trainer. Sometimes we get comfortable and we get stuck in the sagittal plane of movement. What do I mean by sagittal plane of movement? We get stuck in squats. We get stuck doing lunges. We get stuck doing bicep curls and, things like that. We're just always stuck in that sagittal plane of movement. So here and things like here, like I'm just bringing my arms up so you can see me. But we forget, especially about that transverse plane of movement where we start to rotate through the body. So we're going to just give you permission today. Now, if I don't say something, but it sparks an idea, then run with that idea, of course. So let's talk about three-dimensional training, and I'm going to talk a little bit about biomechanics today, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because you guys hear biomechanics and you're like, la, 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 la. But it's a reminder that we have 3 planes of movement and we live and work in 3 planes of movement every single day. But often in a group environment or a one-on-one environment working with a trainer, even when we work out on our own, sometimes we get stuck in that sagittal plane of movement, or we get stuck in the frontal plane of movement, but we forget to make it dynamic. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So like I said, I'm going to touch on a couple of biomechanical things. So of course, 3-dimensional training. I'm going to talk about lever length. I'm not talking about the lever. So you don't have to remember class 1, class 2, or class 3, right? In real life, when is anyone going to ask you that? Never. So we're going to talk about the lever length. And then, of course, talk about the center of gravity and how center of gravity is really going to impact your movement. So, of course, it's a core base. And of course, a reminder, and some of you've heard me say this before, your core is everything but your face, pretty much. From the earlobes down, think about it, right? If we get into a plank, our arms are in it, our legs are in it, but we're really focusing on, in plank, that anterior chain. Even though that posterior chain, the backside of the body, is gonna kick in, we're kind of kicking in that anterior chain. So really, the tips of your toes, the bottom of your feet, your knees, your legs, your arms are all part of that core. And that's what we're going to try to engage today, is not just thinking crunches. We're not just thinking planks, is let's do standing integrated series. So squats and balancing, side lunges to kick that core in. So we'll go through that. My goal today, do a little bit of a lecture just to bring us up, and then I want to play for the remainder of the time. You can choose to just watch me, or you can choose to participate with me, take notes, and ask questions. Good? Okay. So of course, said it before, but we do function in a three-dimensional environment. So that's what I really want us to take away today, is thinking about that. In traditional training methods, just like I mentioned earlier, we tend to get stuck in that sagittal plane of movement where it's flexion and extension. So squats, our lunges, our bicep curls, our tricep kickbacks. And of course, the transverse plane of movement tends to get neglected the most often. And this is where our clients, this is where our participants tend to get injured. So how many of you, if we can see hands, have been doing a lot of gardening? Anyone doing gardening? Yes, no, maybe so. Some of you are like, no, I'm too busy teaching classes on Zoom, Jessica. I've been doing a lot of gardening, and I know that my Zoom participants, especially my older adults, have been doing a lot of gardening also. And what are they complaining to me right now? Their lower back hurts, because what they're doing is they're hinged over, right, like this, and then they're doing activities where they're rotating, and they're hinging forward, and then they're rotating through it. Well, if we don't train our body that way, if we don't use our body that way, then how can the muscles work with you? And so then you're left, and of course, hinging forward is really hard on those hip flexors, and we tend to sometimes forget about that. Our society loves crunches. So today I taught my boot camp class, and I don't do a lot of crunches in my class because I do a lot of core training, three-dimensional core training. But I always add a little element. Well, when I was done, I could see one woman on the screen doing all kinds of crunches. Like, she was like crunching like a beast, because in her mind, she needs to do crunches to get that six-pack to strengthen her core. But if we think about where the hip flexors, specifically the iliopsoas, okay, so the iliacus and the psoas major, this is where you can start to get the good shots. All right, you ready? Da, 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 dum, dum. So the hip flexors coming in right through here, the iliopsoas, and then it's going to ride right through the pelvis and then come into that lower back. So when we're doing activities like crunches, and we're doing activities like V-sits over and over and over again, or we're hinging, the hip flexor gets stuck in a shortened position. And when it gets stuck in that shortened position, it's gonna pull on the lower back. And that's where that lower back pain is gonna come in. So let's move away from just doing crunches. And I'm sure if you haven't read any of his research, Dr. McGill does significant research on the core, and of course trying to avoid just crunching. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to include anterior abdominal exercises or a crunch like movement, because you can still do crunches, but it's not just doing a whole crunch class. And we're going to add the three-dimensional training. So here are your three planes of movement, and then in the next slides are going to get a little bit more detail. So in that sagittal plane, now, if you're not as familiar with the biomechanics, or you did this in exercise theory, and you're like, oh, every time I look at this, I get overwhelmed. I want you to think with the sagittal plane of movement, that piece of paper. So I'm going to use, and this is actually Cheryl Thurston. You guys know Cheryl Thurston? I'm actually stealing this from Cheryl Thurston, so I got to give her credit where credit is due. So see this little piece of paper? Okay. This is how I teach planes of movement. In person, because some of my students here are online students. See where we put that piece of paper through with the pen? I want you to imagine that that's what's going on here. So if I stuck this right on my shoulder, this is my axis of rotation. So this would be flexion. I know it's a bit difficult to see me. okay? This would be flexion, extension, right? If I did it at my elbow joint, that axis of rotation, there's that flexion, there's that extension. If I take that pen and I place it on the side of my knee or my hip, right? So that's where this gets confusing. But look, I'm moving around the axis of rotation, which is the pen. There's that extension, there's that flexion. I can't move in to that piece of paper because the pin is in the way. But if I put the pin through my hip, which then if we jump over to that frontal plane of movement, there's your abduction, your adduction, your abduction, your abduction. So that's what I want you to think when you see that blue line in the picture. Same thing, transverse plane of movement. If I put it over my head, I move my head and I rotate about that axis of rotation. I can't put that piece of paper between my torso. I tried, just doesn't work. Okay, I'm in. So let's talk a little bit more detail about this. If my slides will skip forward. They're like, no, I hate you. They froze. Okay, one quick second. I don't know why. There we go. Okay. So for those of you who are visual learners and you need to see this to believe it, sagittal plane of movement, flexion and extension. So that's going to be walking. We tend to forget that walking, and we do a lot of sagittal plane movements. And that's why as trainers and as instructors, we get stuck there because these are activities of daily living. We do this in our everyday lives. So flexion, extension, front walking, squatting, overhead press. Now, when they say overhead press, that would be overhead press in a narrow press, right? Because if we're going wide elbow, now we're into abduction and adduction. So in this case, so it would be a narrow press. So if you need to update that for your notes, I should have been a little more clear because that would confuse you. If you go to do a traditional overhead press, you would be in abduction or adduction. Think narrow, flexion, and then I come down into a bit of extension. So the same thing, elbow, flexion and extension. There's your shoulders. There's the image for the hips. Flexion of the knees, flexion of the torso, flexion of the head, and of course the ankles. So dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. Any questions about that? We're feeling okay right now? You're like, Jess, I got this. I understand flexion and extension. The next thing we're going to talk about is the frontal plane of movement. And this is where it starts to get a little bit more confusing. So today we're going to be adding movements like abduction and adduction. So moving it away from the midline, that means abduct, we take it away, and then we adduct, we add it back in. So your movement examples, of course, abduction, it should be abduction and then add, A-D-D. Sometimes I look through these slides to make sure there's no mistakes. Then I make them. Side flexion. So just hinging over to the side. Inversion, eversion, this is what we usually traditionally associate with our feet. So think of inversion and then of course eversion, so just rotating. So if you invert, so you roll that ankle. Of course, a star jump, for example, like a jumping jack would be a perfect example of working in the frontal plane of movement. Lateral arm raise, so just an arm raise out to the side. And of course, side bending, which I have that side flexion. So just being mindful of that, moving the head side to side. Good? So that is your frontal plane of movement, and we're going to be playing with that later. After that, we move into our transverse plane of movement. And this is the one that is the least understood, the most underutilized form or plane of movement, really, at the end of the day. So really thinking about that transverse plane of movement, how you can start to incorporate a little bit more of that in your workouts. So of course, you've got internal and external rotation. In the first image, they're showing you external rotation and internal rotation of the hip. Then we have external rotation, internal rotation of that shoulder girdle. Then you can do this one, and I know students always had a hard time with this when we did exercise theory, is horizontal. So think you're lying down, right? So vertical would be going up and down, horizontal adduction, so adding it back in. So if I was lying on a bench and I was doing a chest fly, and you're going, but you're lying on a bench, Jessica, wouldn't your arms now be vertical? Remember, we cue everything in an anatomical position. So that's going to help, especially university students, that this is still pretty fresh to them, is right. We talk about this. And then if I go and lie on a bench, lying on a bench, and I do that, it's still horizontal abduction and adduction, okay? So just being mindful of that. Same thing with a fly. So if I'm standing here and I am doing abduction, well, once I hinge forward, this is still horizontal abduction. It's not vertical abduction because, again, we cue the body from our anatomical position. So that's the one sometimes where I see people get a little bit more confused. Then, of course, you've got supination and pronation. Supination being holding the bowl of soup. So supination, pronation, pour it out. And then, of course, you've got your rotation through the neck. And then, of course, you've got rotation through that torso. So internal, external rotation, horizontal flexion and extension, supination, pronation, vertical throwing, for example, a baseball swing, a golf swing. So a lot of people right now, and everyone's trying to get out there golfing. I was talking to my supervisor, most of you guys know her, Suzette, and they are so booked at the outdoor tennis courts. They've never been that booked ever. There's nowhere to go. So people are golfing and they are playing tennis. And if their bodies, and maybe they haven't played tennis in forever. So people are doing activities they have not done in a really long time. And potentially that could cause injury or discomfort. And we don't want that, do we? So any questions with the 3 planes of movement? So we've got the sagittal plane of movement, flexion and extension. We've got the, so sagittal, I'm thinking frontal in my brain. I'm thinking ahead of what the next thing I'm going to say. So sagittal, flexion and extension, frontal, abduction, adduction, transverse, think rotation. Good? My husband is home. Let me say hi to him. Hi. Okay, bye. He came home to eat and his wife was ignoring him. Yeah. Bye, baby. Okay, now your center of gravity. So we're moving on from those 3 dimensions. So sagittal, frontal, transverse. And then we have to think about our center of gravity and how we move things around. So traditionally speaking, somewhere around, and everyone's a little bit different, but your belly button is kind of your center of gravity. Now, if you're a longer limbed individual, your center of gravity will be lower. If your legs aren't as long, then your center of gravity may be higher. But I want you to think when you're planning exercises where your center of gravity is going to be. And so this is not the perfect picture because in reality, when we actually start to kick ourselves to the side, our center of gravity is actually going to move down a little bit more. But this is just to get you thinking of how can I create, when I'm doing my 3-dimensional workout, how can I make things a little bit more difficult by moving my center of gravity on? So it could be that I just did a squat, for example, but then I rotate over to the side, I'm losing my balance. Right? I just moved my center of gravity and I added a 3-dimensional movement to this. So I went into my sagittal plane of movement and I added my frontal plane of movement. And at the same time, I shifted my center of gravity over. So then this side of my body, and of course, thinking about the legs and that weight distribution, right? I shifted more weight into this leg. So my right leg, well, it's actually my left leg, but your right leg is having to work harder. And this side of my body, the obliques, are going to have to work harder to be able to engage and stabilize. So I want you to think how movement, so the closer you are to the ground, how that's going to affect your center of gravity. If you're standing on one leg, if you're hinging forward, if you're hinging over to the side into lateral flexion, how is that going to affect your center of gravity? And thinking about offering your participants options. So one of the things I do a lot in my fitness classes, and I'm sure that it drives some people nuts because I'm like, here's option 1, here's option 2, here's option 3. We're at option 7, right? So let's say, can you see me? Don't worry about my head, right? So if I'm here, right, what's going on with my center of gravity? But if I'm here, my center of gravity has started to shift. Well, there's Gussie Watsy. So I have 2 dogs. This is the Chiser. He's a Schnauzer and a Chihuahua. That's Gussie. And then I'm sure the lab will be here soon. All right, so then look how my center of gravity is changing. So as I'm moving down, my center of gravity when I was here, straight down. And then it starts to shoot, and then it has to shift in my body. So the further I go into this, the more feedback I'm gonna get the leg I'm standing on, but the obliques on the side of my abdomen are really gonna kick in to challenge the body. So making sure that with our participants, we're giving them options because they may not have the core strength or the ability to properly stabilize. And if they're not able to properly stabilize, they're not gonna be able to move very well. So thinking about that center of gravity. Next, we talk about the lengths of levers. And I couldn't find a really good example online because then it started actually going through the classes of levers. And I'm like, I do not want to talk about classes of levers, but give us that reminder. So the taller an individual is, the longer, of course, their levers are going to be. And so traditionally speaking, that means we can produce more power. So being mindful of that. So if somebody in your class, for example, or you're working with a client who is smaller stature, right? Those levers are going to affect them versus somebody who's really tall. I also want you to think when you're thinking about the lever length is I'm going to use the example of a lateral raise. So if I'm doing a lateral raise like this, right? My levers are at their full length, their full ability. But if I'm new to exercise, I may not have the strength. Even if I'm using 3 or 5 pounds, I may not have the strength to be efficient to come through here. How do I modify the exercise to make this a little bit more manageable? I would then bend my elbows and I would do the same exercise with my elbows bent. So I just shortened my lever. I just lengthened my lever. So, oh, there's the Labrador. I'm sure she'll be on her back trying to get me to rub her belly before you know it. So the longer the lever, the more challenging the exercise is going to be. The shorter the lever, the more manageable an exercise will be. So thinking about that when you're applying that to your 3-dimensional training. So we think about the 3 dimensions, sagittal, frontal, transverse. We think about our center of gravity. So, and also our base of support. So let me take one step back. I want you to think about your base of support. So if you've got a nice wide stance, and I'm gonna give you that demo again. If you have a nice wide stance, right? My base of support is going to be a lot bigger. My center of gravity is gonna end up being a little bit lower. If I bring my feet closer, like she's like, I gotta be on the camera, Mom. Look, on her back. Gotta rub the belly. All right, so then here. Then of course my base, no. We just played. So our base of support is going to be different. Look at my base of support has now changed, and then my center of gravity has to shift. So of course this will be easier. This will be a little bit harder. This will be the hardest option. So I want you to also think about that when you're doing that program design, those elements of the program design. And of course, we talked about the lever lengths. So of course, a quick reminder, and I'm not gonna go in this in too much detail. I tried to find a couple of images and they were just way too detailed, but it's just to remind everybody that your core is not just your rectus abdominis. I want you to think of your core as a can of pop. And so at the top of your can of pop, of course, is your diaphragm, right? And that's really important in breathing. Then you've got the rest of the can, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. And then the bottom of the can, right, your pelvic floor muscles. And so with that can, even though that can is cylindrical, and we're not cylindrical exactly, but think at the front of the can, you've got the rectus abdominis, right? You've got obliques on the side. On the back of the can, you have your quadratus lumborum. And so just being mindful of that. Of course, your transverse abdominis. I always like to cue this one, and most of you, I know that you have learned this so many times, but think of that transverse abdominis as like a belt, and it's a deep layer of muscles that are really holding your insides in. And I like to think that mine is like an 80s belt, right? It fans out, it is bedazzled, it's gorgeous, it's just gorgeous. And so thinking about that transverse abdominis, the multifidi or the multifidus are little muscles that connect each of our vertebrae or vertebra, and you're only as strong as your weakest multifidus. So just being mindful of that. So if one multifidus muscle or multifidi is weak, then that's going to affect that whole spinal chain of what's going to be happening. So being mindful of that. Of course, the quadratus lumborum, your lower back muscles, and of course, quadratus being 4 heads. Obliques are the muscles on the side of the abdomen. Gonna blow your mind with this one, erector spinae. It's the muscle that runs along the spine to keep you erect. And so really important in getting into there, and not forgetting about our glutes. So our glutes play a really important part in this. So you'll see me doing a lot of activity trying to recruit the glutes, because once we start to lose that bootay and our glute recruitment, then that core isn't going to be as strong. So not forgetting about the glute maximus, glute minimus, glute medius. Good? That was a like Cole's note version of the core, but just a reminder to not forget. And did you see here, right? We've got the rectus abdominis, but it was layered with multiple other muscles. So the core, of course, is a major link in the body's muscular, and that should be and skeletal or skeletal chain of movement. And it's making sure that we understand it so we can fully achieve our most potential out of each exercise. Okay. So blowing your minds right now. We want to first, of course, create the foundation. So we don't want to take a brand new client or brand new participants, or you just started teaching this class, whatever that may be, and then start getting way too fancy. We want to start layering this in. So when you're thinking about creating the foundation, is what does their squat look like? Now, some of you have been in other sessions with me before, and you're not going to be surprised to hear this. Even my university students, I harp it down their throats. We need to create mobility before we can create stability, if you want to write that down somewhere. So we need to be able to mobilize in order to be able to stabilize. So if you can't touch your toes, what do you think your squat's going to look like? Are you going to have a proper mobility through your posterior chain to properly stabilize? Or will the wrong muscles get recruited so that you can get through that movement pattern? So I really want you to think about that, is how can we create mobility in order to create stability? So we don't want to get too fancy right away with the 3-dimensional training, because we have to first create our foundation and then start to add the 3-dimensional training. And we're going to talk about that in a couple of moments in a few slides from now, is I want you to think how you're going to layer this all together, okay? And then, of course, here it is. So I want you to think about, and I didn't put them, it's not that one is better than the other or one is easier or harder than the other, but I want you to think isotonic. So isotonic, concentric, eccentric, so lengthening and shortening. So that's where we're moving through the range of motion, and maybe we're adding 3-dimensional training. And then you can do more isometric. That would be like isolation. So you're holding a squat or you're holding a lunge, and then you're adding variations like a chop or a twist or a hinge or a lateral side bend while we're isolating. And then, oh my gosh, sorry, I got coronavirus. I don't have coronavirus, I'm just teasing. Okay? You're like, that's not even funny, Jessica. All right, so multi 3D movements in one pattern. That's gonna be your most complicated one. You're gonna save that for last, right? So you don't come in, right, first day of class, working with your client, and you're like, okay, here we go, lunge, twist, hook, chop, hook. They're gonna be all over the place. And look, I couldn't even isolate through that movement. So we don't wanna add too many layers on right away. So we're gonna get there today. We're gonna do some of our key movements doing isotonic, so we're gonna add movement, and you're gonna have time to play. Because maybe you personally go, meh, right? Meh. It's like, who's texting me messages? It's one of you. Okay, where was I? I'm so easily distracted. ADHD. Okay, so what we're gonna do when we start to play is that even if I don't do the movement pattern, but you have a better move than me, write it down so you don't forget about it. Don't even tell me about it. You can be like, I got better moves than Jess. So when we start playing, we're gonna do some isotonic, so we're gonna move through the range of motion. Then we'll do stuff where we isolate perhaps the lower body and then move the upper body, or vice versa. And then after that, we'll add some multi 3D movements in one pattern. So it could be a squat with a lateral reach and then a chop down with the opposite arm. So that way there we get the sagittal, we get the frontal, and we get the transverse plane of movement. Good? Okay, these are the areas that we're going to be focusing on now. So we're going to go through some squatting activities. We're going to go through some lunges, hinging. So I didn't write deadlifts, but thinking about forward hingings, because lots of you I saw today, you're teaching yoga, you're teaching Pilates, you're teaching fitness classes, you may be doing one-on-one personal training. And so how can we incorporate that in all of our workouts? So we'll be doing the squat, the lunge, hinging. Then we're going to go to all fours, and I put all fours and back extensions together. And then we'll go through plank variations, push-up variations, and crunch/V-sit variations. Now, these are the foundations of all of our movements. So let me just jump back for a moment. I promise I'll come right back to the slide. Is create the foundation. So in day one of a class or a program or with a client, we just squat, we just lunge, we just hinge, we just do a plank, we don't get too fancy. And then what that does is it keeps our programs and our classes more fresh, more exciting, a little bit more interesting, whatever that may be. Good? Yes? Okay, are we ready to get moving? You're like, yeah, Jeff. All right, let me stop sharing. I should be the main person you see on your screen now. All right, I'm just gonna move this down. I'm just trying to move. I keep my little thing open so when people come in, the unfortunate thing is when my slides are up, I can't see everybody. Okay, so let's get ready to move. I personally will tell you, I like to work barefoot. The reason I like to work barefoot, and that may not always be available, obviously when you're working on a weight floor, or if you're working in a gym, in a class setting, you may not be able to let your participants be barefoot. But if we really think about it, hey, is there any men here today? Our feet are our second brain, except for men, it's their third. So I want you to think of that, your feet. So if your feet are in a sneaker, right? And especially these sneakers, they're cute, they match my outfit, but guess what they don't offer me? They don't offer me a lot of support. My foot ends up having to work a lot harder, and I don't have as much stability. And then you're like, but you're gonna reverse your thing. Yes, it's going to affect, if I don't have a lot of stability, it's going to affect my mobility. And you're like, but that's the opposite. I know. So I'm gonna give you feedback. If you'd like, go barefoot. I'm gonna go barefoot, because you're gonna have a better connection. Okay, so we ready for this? So we're gonna go through each activity. You can do it standing. You don't have to play if you don't want to. You can see me okay and you can hear me okay? I'm actually gonna shoot the camera down just a pinch. So let's go through our hinging, squatting activities. I think we're good here? Yes. Okay, off to the side. So everyone's squat is going to be a little different. Some people like to squat feet facing forward. Traditionally, because, and especially women and men, we tend to do a little bit of external rotation. Now, I'm exaggerating right now because I'm on camera, but I want you to find a foot position. And often when we say about hip distance apart, a lot of people think this part of the hips, hip distance apart. So if you look here, I'm a little wider, but you may go, this is what I like. This feels, or go shoulder distance apart. Then from there, you want to try to get as deep as you comfortably can. Now, with that being said, I'm going to show you something. Some of you may have been with me when I did the movement session. I'm going to steal the muscle testing book. Watch what happens to my squat. So I want you to watch my squat right here. I want to see how high. So notice, look how I had to hinge. I had to hinge. Look how much I had to hinge. Now I'm going to lift my heels off. Okay, watch my upper body. I don't have to hinge as much. So that tells me there's weakness in my posterior chain. Specifically, and some of you were with me in that session, that is weakness in my upper back, right around my rhomboids, my traps, because I didn't spend enough time on all fours crawling. I didn't have time to crawl. I was too busy for crawling. I went straight to walking because I had places to go and people to see. Okay, everyone knows a squat. So what can we do to this squat right now? So we got the sagittal plane of movement. Maybe we stay. There's nothing wrong with staying in the, hey, Gussie Wussy. No, 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 no. So you can stay in that sagittal plane of movement, add the arms overhead. So again, right? So we're still in that sagittal plane of movement. Maybe you choose, I'm gonna back up a bit, right? Sagittal plane of movement. Then from there, throw my center of gravity off a bit, and why don't I push one arm out to the side, right? So try that. So now I've added abduction through that shoulder girdle. And then I tried on the other side. I'm already starting to get warm. I haven't even done anything yet. Woo! Here we go, right? So you could be here. So this is something where we're still in the sagittal plane of movement, but now we've added the frontal plane of movement. So we've got that. That's where we're moving. So isotonic, I'm creating movement while I'm still here. Now, why don't we create an isometric? So come down and hold that squat, and then do the same thing. Just the arms to start. Right? So notice where are you getting feedback here? Right? Isolation in the legs, and then seeing how far I can get those arms. Now, let's try adding that one arm. Right? So I added that frontal plane of movement. So I'm isolating through my lower body while my upper body is moving. Then if I want, I can start to make this even more dynamic. So perhaps I come here and I add rotation now. But being mindful when we go there, what's going on with my knees? So trying to cue, because what's going to happen is people try to twist and then their knees follow them and they're trying to lock their feet on the ground. So we have to maintain that nice even distribution through those feet. So there, in one movement pattern, right, we did all of those three key things I said we were going to do. So we did isotonic, we were just moving. We did sagittal, right, we were moving up and down. Then we did the isometric where we held it. And then we added that three-dimensional complete component where we did frontal, sagittal, transverse. So there's an example right there. Did that make a bit of sense? Good? Okay. We're gonna do another squatting activity. I know, the girls look good. Thank you. It's all about two bras. Okay, we ready for this? Someone's gonna watch this video later and be like, what is wrong with her? Why do we pay her? It's because I'm with my peers. I know who's here. Okay, so the next thing we can do, still that same foundation, still doing the squat. So then we can squat down. Now, one of my favorite exercises, this is where we're gonna affect those lever lengths, right? All you do is just pull that one arm back. Let me show you from the side, right? So I'm isolating, and I just pull that one elbow back, and then over to the other side. Now, thinking about my lever lengths, right? So those lever lengths, how do I suddenly make this harder? What can I do? Now, does anyone remember with this plane of movement? Horizontal abduction. So this is three-dimensional training through that transverse plane of movement. Now, you're like, okay, I got this. This is one of my favorite exercises for people, of course, who play tennis, rackets, or any racket sport, golf. And then the other thing I do, so you're ready to make this a little bit harder because your participants will get this pretty quickly. Now, if you wanted to, you could add movement to this. I don't feel like it's as natural, but don't be shy to try different things. I'm gonna tell you, the next move, I stole it from Helen Vanderberg. So, option number one, the heel comes off. What that's going to do is it's gonna isolate the leg you're standing on. So extra firing in the glutes, the hamstrings, the quadriceps. Then, with my heel off, I sit as deep as I comfortably can, and then that hand glides through, but I only do the same hand. So I'm not rotating this way. Why not? You could, but, so what we're gonna do for now, give this a try. So the heel is off. Try that 3 or 4 times. And now notice, if I have a lot of balance issues, keep your gaze down. If you want, follow your hand. that will make it significantly harder. Try the other leg to say you did it. And then I'm going to give you an option to try it with the other way. So notice how my foot was here. Now, I just made this a little bit more challenging. I put my foot, so notice how small my base of support is. So here, that was my base of support. Base of support changed because I now got more weight over here. Now, I put my foot behind the other foot, okay? And let's do the same thing, but start with the elbow bent to start. Oh, snap. Didn't that just get a lot harder? Then if you want, try it with a long arm. Remember to link that breath. How do you add even more challenge? Put that leg even further back. Hi, Bella. Bella's awake. So notice my foot here. So same thing, I started here. So all I'm doing, and this is how you can progress your classes, base of support changed, base of support changed, base of support, and even more challenging, if you can see, maybe the lighting's better here, I step that foot even further back to really move my center of gravity and get through there and decrease my base of support. Good? Any questions about that right now? Couple of new ideas, maybe a couple of refreshers. Okay, so now let's take that squat. So we were doing that regular squat, but we haven't really done anything unique with the, well, we did unique with the legs. I mean, we crossed it back. But now let's do a side squat. So then we can get into that frontal plane of movement. So even though, right, this activity is sagittal, but the stepping in and out of the leg is a frontal plane of movement. So you can do that alternating sides if you'd like. So then we're gonna add movement to this. So let's alternate, and then we're gonna chop the opposite arm down. So chop, come back up together. Separate, chop, come back together. So see how we're moving isotonically through each of these. Now, if you want, let's try isolating. So we're out here, maybe a bit more of a plie, and then isolate and chop. Back up. Yes. So very similar movement patterns. Keep that going, 2 more. Very similar movement patterns, but did you notice which one was harder for you? So was it harder to move, or was it harder to isolate and add that chop? So if it's harder for you, think about how that's going to affect your participants. Okay, so then we did those side squats. Side lunges are coming when I do the lunges, right? So now, let's try something a little different. Let's squat down to the side. Let's add that chop. Then come up, balance, and a little reach. Okay, let me take a step back. Remember my office, I only got so much space. So side squat, chop, come back up, balance, and then reach. Remember that flexion over here, frontal plane of movement. So try it again. Down, chop, up, reach, dip. So really systematic in how you do it. Let's try the other side just to make sure we're balanced. So again, squat, down, chop, take it up and balance. Do we have to? You can keep the toe on the ground, and then a hinge. So try that again. And then as your participants get better, this is where speed starts to change the whole workout. So you ready? So down, chop, up. It gets a lot messier, doesn't it though? So I like to just say, stop, stop, in, up, reach. So that variation, that core has to really kick in. Almost adds an element of plyometric training, right? Because there's that bit of explosiveness. So if, as you're progressing through with your participants, if that's not challenging enough, then get them to change up their tempo, where they have to move quickly, lock it in. Would you ever add, Kim, what a wonderful question. Why not, right? Absolutely, I would add weights to it. I have no weights. I've just been teaching. I know you have great equipment at your house. I'm jealous because I see yours. I see your classes. Why not? Make this about, it could be a strength class. You can put this in your Pilates class. You can make this part of your mind-body class. You can put it in your boot camp. Add weights, add tubing. You could add whatever your heart desires, but hopefully take a couple of good little snippets from that. Yeah, thank you for asking, and I'm happy that you asked. Okay, so just a refresher, we did the squats, we went through the different movements, right? We did through the twist. Then we did the side squat with the reaches, yes? Do we have enough kind of squatting activities just to get us started? We're feeling confident? Okay, let's go to the lunges. Now, when I teach a lunge, I prefer when I teach a lunge to start with a stationary lunge. Then I will progress my participants to a reverse lunge. And then eventually I will progress them to a forward lunge. But it's not very often I take them to a forward lunge, especially in a group environment, because people kind of overstep and it kind of starts getting messy, but we'll still go through those today. Okay, so when you're ready, we're gonna just start with the stationary lunge. So stationary lunge, the way I like to get my participants is they wanna feel a bit of a stretch. Then I get them to push their hip forward. So now when I bring my knee down, look how it's directly below my hip and I'm still nice and stacked. So just a good stationary lunge to start. Woo, and I'm already losing my balance. It's not even 4 o'clock yet. So just a stationary lunge, so review that a few times, try it. All right, so stay in the stationary lunge. We want to think, if we're going to add a lot of movement through here, we want to have some stability. So what you can, of course, always do, again, you sit at that lunge, we can still do that reach. Now being mindful that the knee is going to want to follow. So you can still add that reach. You can still do things where you hinge forward and then come up just one arm. Hinge forward. Let me show you from the side. So it doesn't mean, even though we're doing a sagittal plane of movement, stabilize, come back up. Maybe next time, for my Pilates instructors, add a swim to this. So down, hinge, swim, come back in. Maybe you bring the arms overhead. So there's a good Pilates exercise where people, your traditionalists are like, okay, I'm okay with this, right? Hinge. Remember to segment your movements. Good. So try the other leg just to be sure so you don't walk around in a circle later. So that down, hinge, swim. Now, if you want, try something different. So why don't we, this time I'm gonna add a tick-tock to this. So down, hinge, tick, tock, or tick, tock. Back, stand up. Try it again. So down, hinge, tick, tock, back, and up. So make sure you're switching out those legs just so that you're not destroying yourself. So down, hinge, tick, tock, back up. Woo! Okay, so that was just a stationary lunge. One of my other favorite things I like to do with a stationary lunge is that I make them isometric isolate. So they come down and they hold. We take the arms out to the side, set the shoulders, and then reach as far as you can go without compromising that lower body. And then over to the other side. Now, I'm gonna add speed to this, ready? So by adding that speed, we just made the activity significantly harder. And then we're gonna add a reverse lunge. And we're gonna add a kick to that reverse lunge with a chop. Yeah. Okay, come and join me. If anyone's like, I have been on COVID, my clothes don't fit like they used to, and that's okay. Welcome to COVID self-isolation. Okay, we ready? So reverse lunge. Come back up through, kick. Come down, chop. So same arm, same leg. Chop. Kick. Chop. Kick. And then chop. Try the other leg. So remember, I kicked and I chopped. This can be done with a squat also, right? So your squatting and your lunging activities are going to be similar. But just knowing that there's variations. Really, at the end of the day, trusting yourself as leaders. Hi, Gab. Both my kids are up. Yes. So lunge, kick, into the lunge, chop, bam, here, here. Good. Okay. Now the next activity we're going to do is I'm going to actually add a hinge to this. So I'm going to reverse back after, but we're going to add a hinging movement to this. And then same thing, we can add twist or a reach or a lift. So reverse lunge. I come up into a hinge. Find your balance. So my yogis, warrior 3. Now your participants could be here. They could be here. Now notice I activate the foot because I don't want the calf muscles getting shorter. I activate the foot. Coming in to show you from the front. Now maybe I just do a sagittal plane of movement, right? So you'd be here in that sagittal plane of movement. Maybe I swing the arms out to the side. So let's try that. So reverse lunge, hinge up, hook, lock it. If you want, add a little twist, maybe a little twist, or maybe I'm losing my balance. You reach the arms overhead. So let's try that. Down, hinge. Try something with the arms. Down, hinge. Why not drive the knee in, but watch where I'm going to drive it. Instead of coming into a sagittal pull, try to pull it up. Ooh. Balance is not my thing today. Okay, so try that lunge. Lunge, up, hold. Okay, I'm going to do the other leg. Okay, down, up, and then back down. Try that again. Up. Bring the knee in. And back down. Good. Try a few more like that. Then we're going to go into those hinges. Good? All right. So we did just our traditional stationary lunge. We did a reverse lunge. We added a kick to this. We added some arm movement. We even added a hinge into this. Now what we're going to go into our side lunges. So side lunges, and then we'll come back to the hinge in a couple of moments, but I just want to go through the side lunges. Okay, side lunges, thing to remember, I often see people with their toes pointing forward, and then they do a side lunge. The thing is, your kneecap is designed to absorb everything that's building up in there. Now, if I lunge over to the side, the energy, the forces are blowing out the side of my knee. When I do a side lunge, I want my knee to be here. I want it running, let me take a step back. I want it running through my 2 middle toes, through the center of my ankle, through the center of my knee. So my knee is doing its job. So I always give my participants an option to side squat instead of side lunge. But when you're ready, rotate that foot out, side lunge. Try the other side. Right? So I'm limited on my space, so my lunge is going to look a little bit kind of crammed up. Now, what we can do is add a twist, but first let's just do a sagittal movement to this. So down, sagittal move, and up. Maybe it's just one arm. Sagittal, and up. Then we're going to do frontal. So down, frontal, and up. Maybe it's all one movement. Down, so those of you who are teaching ballet bar classes, right? Then we can go into 3-dimensional where we add a chop to this. So we go down, chop it down, back up. So go down, chop it down, come back up. You can isolate, right? So we can isolate here, reach. We've done that movement pattern before, but we haven't done this with the legs. So it could be down, it could be reach, maybe a hinge and a reach. So thinking about moving through the whole thing. Sometimes I'll take the bender ball. If I have a bender ball, take them here. Circle the bender ball under my foot. Circle it up overhead. Circle it back under my leg. I said foot. And pull it back up. So you can do that without the bender ball also. So just being mindful, right? So those side squats. One of my other favorite things to do after a side squat is to hold you into a side leg lift. So when you're ready, let's do a couple of side lunges. So you do a couple of side lunges. Let's say you did enough that your thighs are now burning and you're all upset. Now you're going to come and hold on one leg. So your foot, I'm going to go on this side, is on a slight diagonal. So traditional yoga, your foot would be pointing forward, but we're going to go on a bit of a diagonal to increase our base of support. Then you can keep your toe on the ground or activate the foot, and you can go as far into this as you would like. So maybe you're able to get parallel with the ground. And then, so again, there's the isolation where we're holding it, so isometric. Now, let's add a leg lift. My dog is like, oh, mom, she's sweating. No mistake. So I like to, again, to keep my foot activated. You'll notice when you activate your foot, when you point the toe, yes, the calves kick in, but you're not going to get the same recruitment through the quadriceps. So activate the foot, and now we've got abduction. If you want, add the arm with it. Nothing you've not seen before. But then what you can do is you add another variation. So now lift, sagittal, pull it back out, lower down. So up, sagittal, tuck it in, and back up. Nice, let's try that one more time. Up, sagittal. All right, try the other side to say that you did it. So little micro bend in the knee. Same thing, go as far as you can. And then I'm only gonna make you do it once or twice here because the next exercise I wanna do a leg pull. Now my Pilates instructors like Lori and Joanne, you're like, we have done leg pulls till the cows come home. But some people have never done their Pilates training and they may not be familiar with that move. So we did that, good? All right, now let's stay here. Leg pull, remember a little micro bend in the knee. We pull the leg as far forward as you can. You point the toe, press it back, back. Activate the foot, pull it forward. Point the toe, press it back, back. Pull it forward. Point the toe, point it back, back. Let's stay here, draw me circles. So for some people you're going, whoa. Others are like, I've done this. Change up the direction of that circle. Yeah. All right, we're good? So you have a couple of ideas. Now, all of this, we could have added arm movements to it, which we did a little bit earlier. Now, we're gonna go into activities where we're hinging. So this is one, Kim, this is a great question you had about the weights. I prefer to do this activity with weights, obviously, right? Because we're doing a modified deadlift. But immediately what I'll have people do is take a heel off. So then they're hinging with a heel off, which because you're right-legged just like you're left-legged, everyone has a dominant leg, so just like you're right-handed or left-handed, you're right-legged or you're left-legged. So by taking a heel off, then you can really isolate through one muscle a little bit more, being the right or the left hamstring. So here's the option one. Option two, of course, we can start to bring that leg up. Same thing, don't forget about the twist and the reach. So you could be here, add a reach, take it in and up. Maybe this time you make it abduction. So down, take it up, take it down, overhead, stand up. Maybe this time you bring the knee into the chest when you do it. So reach, pull it in, reach it up, and stand. Let me show you from the front. So here, reach it in, sweep it up, and in. You can do the same thing, switch the leg, maybe we add a little twist. So we hinge forward, little micro bend, reach down, come back, reach, woo-hoo-hoo, down, come back, stand up. Notice how that rotation is a lot harder. I'm going to show you a different rotation exercise in a moment, and I'm going to show you how to do it with the wall. So I do this a lot with my older adults because I want to strengthen the muscles around their hips. So what you do is you get your hip up against the wall. And then I have their hand. Now you can have it on the wall. I'm lucky enough at the Glencoe we have kind of bars where our stretching area is. So then I have my participants slide down, then stack the hips so both my bum cheeks touch the wall, my foot is activated. Then I unstack the hip and stand back up. You can do this standing. So if you want to see what it looks like. So up, stack the hips. Notice my gaze didn't change. So now in a half moon, back into my warrior three, stand back up. Try the other leg if you can. So again, I prefer a wall, so I get that feedback, right? So I'll show you from a bit of a different angle. So I slide, stack, little bend in the knees, so both my bum cheeks have touched the wall. Unstack, and then come on back up. Good? All right, did that give us enough ideas? So we did squats, we did lunges. With those lunges, we added side lunges, we added leg lifts, then we did the hinging activity. So now you have a couple of ideas. Now with the hinges, I didn't talk about knees or leg movement. There's nothing wrong, right? We're doing like we did earlier, where you could be here, and it just could be a knee drive. It could be a big knee circle, right? Maybe it's a tap back, right? So you're here, tap back, tap out, center and lift. Tap back, tap out, center and lift. So let me show you from the side. So you can be up, tap back, tap side. My Falk students are going, I know this move, we just learned it. Take it back up. So then how far can you get this leg over while stabilizing? So how far can you go here? How far can you go here? And then I added that hinge up. So that move that we just did is actually part of the Y balance test. So for those of you who are CPT, certified personal trainers, if you're not aware, second edition, it's a new assessment that we do. And if you're not sure, you can ask me. All right, we're doing good for time. Now, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. We're good. Well, let me minimize this for a second. I'm just minimizing you for one quick second. Look at my slides. My slides have disappeared. Okay, so we did the hinge, the lunge, the squat. We got to get on all fours. Okay. So all fours, here we go. Can you see me okay? Okay, I'm going to adjust my camera. You get to go even lower. So all fours. Okay. I'm actually going to hinge you up a bit because you're getting most of my desk. So I'm going to just bring you a little bit ahead. There we go. So now we're going to go all fours. You know most of the exercises, your quadrupeds and hovers and all that other great stuff. But then how do we add that element of three-dimensional training? So here we're in our quadruped. Another thing actually, before I jump too far ahead, I'm a big fan of having my participants do activities on their knees or what I call the proposal position. And so chopping activities with cables where they have to be on their knees, or stuff where they do a chop up, or I'll have them do chest press, I'll have them do back exercises in the proposal position or in a kneeling position. Because what that does It's just a different way of training, and it really helps kick that core in. So really thinking about how can I do something like this? How can I do something like this? How can I do something like this in that training of movement? Okay, all fours. So of course you've always got your opposite arm, opposite leg, but everybody starts to get tired of that, don't they? So what's something you could do? So sweep everything away from the midline and coming from the front angle so you can see, right? Sweep it away. Ooh, I'm cheating. I see myself cheating. Look at my foot. Okay, so I swept it away from the midline. Come back to center. Maybe from here, add a lift and a lift. So just a little different variation. So take it up, pull it away, come back to center, put the arm down, lift and lift. For my instructors who are like, I need to be on the beat. Maybe add another lift to this. Maybe you're here, sweep it away, come back in, add a tuck, add a lift. Or make that more interesting from there, cross the foot over to the other side. So let's just see what that looks like here. So I did a lift, oh, I'm running out of space. And I tapped over to the other side. Glute, medius, and minimus isolation. So let's try that little variation. So again, out, sweep it away, pull it back in, maybe add the knee tuck, push it back out, tap the foot over, tap. Try that again. So try a little variation there, and then when you're ready, let's try the other side. So we're here, get it up and level, sweep everything away from the midline, come back to center, lower the hand, add the little lift, pulse, pulse, back up. Sweep it away from the midline, so frontal plane of movement, come back in, lower the hand down, lift, lift, we're in the sagittal plane of movement for the extension of the hips. Now, let's add the tuck and the cross. So sweep it away, come in, tuck it, so sagittal plane of movement, take it back out, a little bit of transverse or frontal plane of movement because we pulled that leg across. Back up, sweep it away, come back in, pull the elbow in, and then cross, drop. Good? So that gave you an idea or two. Now we're gonna add a little rotation into the quadruped. So here, and again, my yogis are like, Jessica, we have been doing this forever. So here, you reach as far as you can go. Maybe this is as far as your participants can go. Maybe you've got people, I'm gonna exaggerate. I had to cheat to do this, okay? So you could be here. Then you take the arm, threading the needle. So have them just come down. But try not, so in yoga, we would let them rest. You can choose to do the rest, so right, we would be like, come and rest. We're not gonna let you rest, don't even let the shoulder touch. So here we come, little rotation, good even distribution through both knees, top of the feet pressed into the mat, reach the arm down, come back up. Give that a try. Try 3 or 4 on one side. And we're gonna sneak that into our side plank after 2. Now, what if you're like, I'm crazy, Jess, and I want extra challenge? Okay, here it is. Leg goes up. Opposite arm is up. Is it gonna be pretty? No, but you will have participants who can do this better than I can. Reach, drop it down. Now we're starting to get a little crazy. This is where people start to cheat. So is it right for your participants? Notice my foot has already dropped, right? But my core is going, are you for real right now? Because I've decreased my base of support. So I went from having 2 knees on, bigger base of support, going down to 1 knee and 1 hand. I've now manipulated my base of support while I'm doing 3-dimensional training. Good? All right, let's get on our belly because we did our quadrupeds. Again, try different variations. You can do different pulls, different twists, but just think about hitting all of those points. Okay, on our belly, press the top of your feet into your mat, firm up your thighs, gently press into your hands, Set your shoulder blades. Now, back extension. That one gets a little bit harder to add movement, but the thing is you can be here. We can choose to take the legs off if you want. Sometimes I make my participants keep their legs down while their arms are up. Same thing, frontal plane of movement, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. I can have them flutter, flexion and extension. I can have them also do a little rotation. Elbow taps down to the ground, back to center. Elbow, very subtle, touches the ground, touches the ground. Now, if I want, I can get those legs involved. Maybe I just leave my head down and I make a little diamond and I rest my forehead into it. And then that way there I can do different variations of my legs. So leg lift, keeping the front of my hip connected. So there's my extension of the hips, flexion of the hips, so I can bend the knee and do this. I could choose to be here. So what if I did a lift, a bend, a press, and then back out, and a little sweep. So up, bend, lift, down, out, sweep. So lift, bend, lift, down, out, sweep. So give that a whirl. Now remember, I was peeking up so I could see you, but you want to be thinking about resting that upper body down. So even though you think back extensions, right, is that we're here, there's still going to be that extension, especially isolating the glutes when we're there, okay? Good. Now, another thing you can also do with back extension, and our Glen co-instructors will be like, oh, that reminds me of Vaughn or Sean, right? So here, trying to keep those hands connected, tap that toe back, and then back to center. I'm hovering. Look how I'm hovering. Here, going as far as I comfortably can, and back down. Up, reach, and back down. That may not be right for everybody's backs. Okay, good. So we did quadrupeds, we did back extensions. Now we're going to go into our side planks, or sorry, face down planks. Let me just peek at the time, I just want to make sure. My time, of course, is all the way across the room. Okay, we're good. So now planks. Remember, planks can be done on the wall for your participants. You can go modified from the knees. You can go modified from the elbows. You can be straight arm. You can be straight leg. Again, when you're introducing movement patterns, especially if you're going to get a little bit more complicated, I always say start modified on the knees, right? And then you can have them press up to the toes. Maybe a leg off, a leg off. You're like, Jessica, none of this is new. Maybe add a push up to this, right? That's my alarm telling me I only have 15 minutes left. I'm going to turn it off while you do that. So this shouldn't be anything that maybe you haven't seen before, but it's just being mindful of it. Now, let's add some more moves to this. So the next one we're going to do, you're going to be in a plank. And we're just going to put the one hip down towards the mat, and then the other hip down towards the mat. I'm going to be in full arm, and straight leg just so you can see it. It doesn't mean it's the right place to be. So here, and I'm going to exaggerate. I would never really push my client this far. Back to center. Drop it down. Back to center. Drop it down. Back to center. So give that a try a few times. So again, we're just adding that rotation, those activities that we do in daily life. So then we're in planks. Why not? So there's nothing wrong with going modified from the knees. So often as instructors, we'll cue legs off, we'll do all kinds of things with the legs, but we forget about how hard it is to take an arm off. So I'm gonna go modified. I'm increasing my base of support, so my knees are separated a little bit more. I bring my hands together, and then you can just alternate an arm off while you're in a plank. This can be done in a wide leg plank, so you increased your base of support. Maybe you take your arm out to the side. Maybe you do a little reach. Maybe a little reach. So just a little drop in the shoulders. Take it out to the side. One of my favorites, and I'm not sure if I got this from you, Joanne, a tree pose plank. So let me show you what your feet are gonna look like when you do it. So you'll be in your plank, but your foot, so see how my hip rotated out? My foot comes and rests gently on the side of my calf. No, 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 no. Yes, 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 yes. Okay? So if you want, give that a try. You can be an elbow plank. Let's try to see it okay? I don't know if you can see that okay. I guess maybe from the back end. Oh, yeah. This is a bugger. If you wanted to, tap, kick, tap, kick, right? So variations. So planks, you can always do walk up, walk down with the elbows. Another one I like to sometimes do is log rolls. So I'll put the hands in genie arms. These are not right for everybody's shoulders though. Is I'll go face down. I'm gonna go modified plank. So face down. And then I just genie flip to the other arm. Then I can do all kinds of different variations, which I'm gonna show you in a moment. Come back to face down, back to face side. So notice how my arms are in genie arms. Now and then I can literally log roll right into a face-up plank. Then you can add all kinds of stuff into there. So I like doing log rolls because then I can get the side, the front, the back, and the other side. So log rolls are a fun one too. Now let's move on to side planks so that we can go over the different variations. I'm gonna go modify from my knee. I'm gonna go modify from my elbow just because my left shoulder with self-quarantining hasn't been really happy with me. So here, and then you're gonna dip the hip. So you can just do regular dip hips right there. If you want, add a twist. So there's your three-dimensional training. So reaching as far as you can comfortably go. Come back up. Maybe add that hip dip again. Dip it down. Pick it up. Twist on through. Guess what I'm gonna add? A leg lift to this. Add a leg lift. Hip dip. And twist. Does it all have to be done together? No. It's just to remind you that your body can move. All right, let's try that on the other side, but this time let's do something different with the legs. So let's start with the hip dip. So hip dip, add the twist. Maybe add that leg pull. Hip dip, add the twist. Leg pull. Maybe you choose to add circles to this. Maybe you drive the knee in towards the chest. Maybe you do a side crunch, right? So knowing and trusting is the biggest thing. All right, so side plank, again, there's only so much you can do with the side planks, but remember, you can do dips, you can twist, you can add leg lifts. Another little secret exercise, which is one of my favorite in the world of Pilates, is a side V-sit. So bring the arm out in front of you, then your hand comes up. You gotta roll onto the side of your booty. You won't be able to move if you don't get into the mass of your ASS. Then that hand guides you up into that side V. You come back down, restack the hips. Roll off the hips. Chop it, back down, restack. The restack is what most people, my participants usually tell me, is what they find some of the hardest. Take the arm out, let's give it a try on the other side. Arm up, roll onto the side of your hips. Then, come on down, restack. If people are new to this, bend the bottom knee, roll onto the side of the hip, and then just this to start. Maybe they can get their upper body to come, but they're not gonna have as much range of motion. So this tends to be an exercise I add later on into my programming once my participants are strong enough to be able to do this successfully, okay? Okay, so we did squats, we did lunges, we did hinging, we did all fours back extensions, we did planks, We touched on push-ups, and if I have time, I will come back to that. But your push-ups can be everything you just did for planks. So you could go down, up, leg lift, anything like that. We did our side stuff. Now let's go and focus on the abdominals. That's what you've been waiting for. Okay, I don't think I'm gonna blow your mind when it comes to abdominals because we've really thought of everything. And if you've been teaching for a long enough time, Kim, do you remember our 15-minute workouts at Fountain Park Health Club? I literally would teach a core class. It was a little bit more balanced than that, but almost 15 minutes of crunches. So at that time, like almost 20 years ago now, I knew every crunch variation you could think of. So I don't think I'm gonna blow your minds away with this. One of my favorite exercises, and I stole this from Janine Robinson and made it my own, is a V-sit, but it's an earthquake. So in Pilates, we will tend to cue a C curve. So you'll round that spine, scooping the abdominals out. But at this point, so many of us are so strong, I can hold this, till the cows come home, right? Doing an earthquake. So some of you are very familiar with this exercise because it's one of my favorite. Nice tall spine. Place an orange under the chin. The spine should be the same as you would be standing up. Place your hands on your ribs so your elbows go behind your midline. This is all moving your center of gravity. Then, if you're hip flexor dominant, take your thumbs, stick it in your hip flexors to try to turn them off. This is where you gotta try to get those booty muscles to not overfire here. So the elbows can go back if you need to, and then lean as far back as you can, maintaining that orange under the chin, elbows behind the midline, and the spine is still stacked. You will get some gripping in the hip flexor, but you should feel the abdominals bracing. It's an earthquake. You should be shaking. Beautiful. So holding that there. Now, you're like, I need a break. Take a break if you can. Then from there, how to make it a little harder, I'm gonna come to the front so you can see me. I just brought my arms up a bit. Remember, they're still behind my midline. If I do this, I just gave my abs a break. Get them back. Then if I wanna make it harder, oh, ah. Right? So let me just show you. Then from there, one of my favorite Pilates exercises is I call it passing the soup, and then sit back up. But we're not gonna round the spine, we're gonna keep it stacked. Because this is not a Pilates session. Some good Pilates ideas. Nice. There's my phone telling me I gotta wrap it up. I got all kinds of alarms so I don't waste your time. So you keep doing that. Now, maybe you add a cross and a chop. All right, I got 6 minutes left. 6 minutes left, but time for questions. Okay, then from there, come on down. You're one leg up at a time. Don't worry, I got shorts on. Nobody's getting a view. One of my other favorite exercises to help isolate the abdominals, you can either be lying or in a crunch. And we're gonna imagine we're wringing out a towel. So your legs are here, and they're gonna go as far over as you can without letting the legs drop, okay? So you're going as far over as you can. Then you come back to center, you reset. So there's that 3-dimensional training. Ooh, look, I lost my core connection. Ooh. Then what I have my participants do is they notice the arms, take the arms across the chest. And now do the same thing, but notice how it just got a lot harder. Why? What do you think? Center of gravity, right? Because I put my arms across my chest, my legs are now, the levers are a lot longer, and that's gonna make the exercise harder. So I have the hands across the chest, either head up or down, and just kind of wringing out that towel. And of course, going back to Pilates, because Pilates always did such a great job with this, you can separate, windmill, come back together. Separate, windmill, come back together. Separate, windmill, come back together. So just a different variation on just doing different things with the legs, and that's gonna help isolate those abdominals. And one more up my sleeve, and we've probably done this one, but Bronwyn, are you there? This is Bronwyn's exercise. So Bronwyn and I before COVID, used to co-teach on Wednesdays. And we're gonna do a penguin, or what I like to call a reach. So coming up into that crunch, you just tap the ankle. Tap the ankle. It's a really great way to isolate the obliques, tapping the ankle. Then what you can also do, one thing that I used to do in my old classes is climb up the rope. But let's climb up the rope. Instead of climbing up the rope center, you're gonna climb up, 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 and down. Go across, up, 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 and down. Tap the ankles twice. Tap, tap, crawl up, 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 and down. Crawl up, 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 and down. How's that? So again, you can do all kinds of activities where you're twisting. You've all probably done reverse crunches, you've done crunches, you've done leg variation. Trust the body. Think about trying to pull across that midline, trying to get into that frontal plane of movement, but don't forget the sagittal plane too. I know we love it.